I'd now like to welcome Cy Walker, today's guest presenter. Cy is an Affiliates Partner Manager at Crowdfunder UK. Crowdfunder UK is the largest UK-based rewards crowdfunding platform. Crowdfunder UK raises millions of pounds for projects across many different areas, including communities, groups, organisations, charities, startups, sports clubs, individuals and of course social enterprises. Crowdfund has been around for 3 years and are the centrepiece of the UK's largest crowdfunding network, working in partnership with companies such as Crowdcube, Virgin Startup, the Design Council, River Cottage, Energy Share, JC Decau, PayPal and Nesta, amongst others. So whilst crowdfunding is fairly new, chances are, while you know your speciality inside out, having the knowledge to run a successful crowdfunding campaign is simply out of your scope. Cy helps businesses, communities, social enterprises and people with ideas to optimise their projects from a crowdfunding perspective and shares his experiences and strategies for success. Working in a young industry but in helping projects reach their targets on a daily basis, Cy has become acquainted with a certain formula for a triumphant crowdfunding campaign. On a personal level, Cy is passionate about building businesses and communities and entrepreneurship and aspiring for excellence. So I'd like to thank you all today for joining us, and I'd now like to hand you over to Cy.
Okay, thank you, Julie, for a very eloquent introduction. So my name's Cy. As Julie said, I work on the partnerships team at Crowdfunder. I moved over to the partnerships team fairly recently, and for the last 18 months before that, I ran the Crowdfunder Academy, which is a team of coaches who teach any type of project how to crowdfund successfully. So during that time, built up quite a body of knowledge about what makes a successful project, coached hundreds of projects with an average success rate of, I think, 85%. So today, I want to try and deliver some of that knowledge to everybody in the webinar. I'm being very excited to run the webinar because social enterprises make by far the best crowdfunding projects. And by the end, hopefully everyone will have more knowledge about running a successful crowdfunding project than 95% of the UK, is what I'm hoping. That's the goal. So I'll give you a quick introduction into Crowdfunder and crowdfunding. I'll keep it very high level, and I'll dive straight into the good stuff as soon as possible, which is how to actually do it. So Crowdfunder is the largest UK-based crowdfunding platform. We have helped thousands of projects raise millions of pounds across lots of different industries. We've gone from projects that are £50 all the way up to projects that have raised millions. Our average success rate is very high. We're nearly double that of other UK-based crowdfunding platforms, and we sit in the centre of a very big network across the UK. And so it's not just about the rewards-based crowdfunding that we specialise and support you in, but also if you want to move on into different areas of perhaps growth for your social enterprise, we have lots of partnerships in place that can help you do that and help you, or help add value to your social enterprise. So that's a little bit about Crowdfunder. What is crowdfunding? Again, I want to keep it very high level. There's 4 different types of crowdfunding, 4 main streams. The first is equity. This is your typical Dragon's Den style of crowdfunding, where in return for a financial pledge, the backer receives a percentage of equity in the business that you're raising money for. The second is lending, often called peer-to-peer crowdfunding. This is where, in return for a financial pledge, your backer will receive an interest repayment. So it's very similar to what might happen if you go for a loan to a bank. The third is rewards-based, so this is what we specialise in. Rewards-based crowdfunding is where, in return for a financial pledge, your backer receives some form of non-financial product or service. It could be an acknowledgement of thanks or some sort of experience. It's something non-financial, and it's usually something very tangible, and something that you could post out to someone, for instance. The fourth and final type of crowdfunding, which is relatively new in the crowdfunding scene, is community shares crowdfunding. That is where a community will get together and crowdfund to purchase some sort of asset of value. For instance, if a local pub is being sold or going under, the community might all come together and purchase that pub, and it's owned by the community and run by the community. It's very similar to equity, except for the person buying a share in the community asset never really expects to get any sort of financial return. So it's sort of a cross between equity and rewards-based. What's important with the four types of crowdfunding is when to use them. Quite often people will start with rewards-based crowdfunding to validate the ideas. That's what we specialise in. If you are interested in running community shares or going for peer-to-peer or equity crowdfunding, then still do get in touch. We've got partnerships in the equity and peer-to-peer space that we can fast-track you through and support you in that journey. For instance, we've coached roughly £6 million worth of equity crowdfunding through our partnerships. Similarly, community shares, we've just launched the community share platform on Crowdfunder, and we can support any sort of purchase of community assets that you might want to be involved with. That's enough about the four different types. Specifically, I'll drive down into rewards-based crowdfunding, and the best way to describe what rewards-based crowdfunding is with an example. So this is one of our favourites. Phil was one of the first people to crowdfund on Crowdfunder many years ago, but we really like using his example because it's a classic case of how to use rewards-based crowdfunding. So Phil wanted to start up a bakery up in Leeds. That's Phil in the picture next to Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall. And he needed £8 to purchase the bread oven, which is the main part of equipment that he would use on a day-to-day basis. He went to the bank and they wouldn't give him any money, but Phil knew that if he made it, then people would come. He just needed to prove it. So he started a project on Crowdfunder. That project went on to raise over £8,500 from 114 different people within his local community. It gave him the money he needed to purchase the bread oven. Phil's now been up and running for 2 years. He runs a very successful bakery up in Leeds. And actually there's five points there on the slide, but the sixth one should be, it's actually missing. Phil did go back to the bank after he raised £8,000. And he showed them his crowdfunding project and the fact that he had 114 customers already. He validated the idea and he had a bit of capital behind him from that £8,000 to use as collateral, and the bank actually gave him a loan following that to help him expand. I think that was about 6 months after the crowdfunding project. So that's Phil. That's sort of how a project is run. Why would you run a project is quite an interesting one. So the obvious reason would be funding. That's why the primary reason why most people would run a crowdfunding project. But actually it's much more than that, and there's many more benefits to running a crowdfunding project than just the cash. So the next most obvious, I guess, would be marketing. Crowdfunding is a very good way of getting lots of free marketing for your social enterprise. It's very good at building awareness. People like to share projects on social media. It seems to find its way through lots of various online networks. The press really like crowdfunding because more often than not it's a success story and it's about something innovative, so it's a great way to get articles out in publications or on online blogs. Really what it boils down to is it's impossible to fund a crowdfunding project without having people looking at it and seeing it. So a lot of the work that you do in creating a project will be about driving awareness, and once you have those people who are backing your project, you get very high levels of engagement, which brings me on to the next point on the bottom right there, which is the advocates. So when you have a community of people backing your project, or a customer base, or even if it's friends and family, the engagement level is very high, and some people call this a tribe, some people call it early adopters. Whatever you want to say, these people are super engaged and they become the best advocates that you, your business, your social enterprise can possibly have. They've invested in your product and your idea at potentially one of its earliest stages, and they want to see that happen. Partly because they've obviously bought into what it is that you want to do, and partly because they need to prove to their friends that they've backed something which is successful, sort of self-validating their own idea. So that group of advocates is very, very powerful, and that's something that you can use 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years down the line. The final thing, which is becoming really important with rewards-based crowdfunding, and a reason why lots of people are taking to it, is idea validation. When you run a successful crowdfunding project, you've persuaded a group of people to part with their own hard-earned cash most of the time without ever having seen your product before. You've proven that you can go out and market your idea. You've proven that you've got an idea which will sell. You've raised funding off the back of your idea, and that's very powerful for taking out to groups that might give you further funding down the line. So whether that's a bank loan just like Phil got 6 months later, or if you want to go to any sort of angel investors or a syndicate, whether you want to raise money through an equity crowdfund, it's a very powerful way of proving, giving evidence to those further funders that you have an idea that people want and you have an idea that will work. How does it work? This is, again, very, very high level. So, number one, you need to create a project on Crowdfunder. I'll go into a lot more detail about what that means later, but without a project for people to look at, no one's going to find you and pledge any money. Number two, you've got to share that project with the crowd, whoever that might be. They pledge on your project in return for rewards, and number three, your idea gets funded. So very high level, that is how it works. So I'm going to go into a lot more detail about that, but first, just want to draw your attention to something which Crowdfunder have on our website, which is a social enterprise campaign. So Crowdfunder is a limited company. Last June, Nesta invested in us, and as part of the investment, we changed our articles of association to say the purpose of Crowdfunder is to support and promote social enterprises. This is one of the ways which we do that. So we have a page on Crowdfunder which collects all the social enterprise projects, and we use that to promote all of the social enterprises that are live and that are funded and that have previously funded. So if you go ahead to start a project on Crowdfunder, then your project will sit within the social enterprise campaign. If you do start a project, it will look something like this. So you can go onto Crowdfunder and see this project. It's not live any longer, but you can certainly have a look and see what sort of things these guys did. It was a real junk food project in Brighton, really good social enterprise project. They opened a new Pay What You Feel cafe in Brighton. I'd highly advise that you check it out. But what you're seeing there is a video at the top, a list of rewards which runs down the right-hand side, and underneath the video you will have a written description. That concludes the introduction. Who is Crowdfunder and what is crowdfunding? So we're going to get right into the good stuff now, which are the 6 steps to crowdfunding success. These aren't necessarily in chronological order. You don't need to do one after the other, but all 6 will need to be done in order to increase your likelihood of running a successful project. So starting off, we need a team. There's a few skills that are required to run a successful crowdfunding project. If you don't have some of these skills, then you need to try and find them and onboard them into a team. So they're all fairly self-explanatory. Somebody to make a video or someone who has the capacity to make you a video is very important for crowdfunding. I'll come on to that a little bit later. You really need somebody to drive the project, coordinate it, and keep an idea of the bigger picture. Thirdly, somebody who knows what it is that you're doing so that they can relay that information to whoever's writing the copy. whether that's product-specific information or process information. Somebody who can give you credibility through knowledge on your crowdfunding page is important. If you don't have anyone who's digitally savvy, you need to try and find someone. So that the ad project flow and creating a project and sharing a project on Crowdfunder has been built to make it as easy as possible. But if you have somebody who knows how to copy and paste and how to put links in different places, then that's going to speed up the time it takes to create a project and make life much easier. The last two, networking and someone to shout about it, are sort of the same thing. They relate to marketing. So you need to find key influencers within the industry that you want to start your social enterprise in, and that's where networking becomes a very important tool. And once you're live, you need someone who's very good at shouting about it. So whether that's online via Twitter and Facebook, or it's going around and talking to people at the local pub, you need those people who can get your project out there. So they're the skills. Hopefully that's all fairly self-explanatory. Another reason why the team is really important is purely for building up backers. So if I was to start a project, I reckon that I have 10 friends that I could get to pledge on the project just because they're my friends, not because they particularly like what I'm doing or particularly care, but I reckon that if I started one, I could get 10 friends to pledge. If I put together a team of 5 people, and all of those 5 people had 10 friends, which I think everybody could probably find 10 people to back the project, that's 50 backers that you've guaranteed to support your project before you start. If those 50 backers then go out to their own networks, you end up with a very strong base of people supporting your crowdfunding project from minute one. So that's something that's always overlooked, but the more people that you have bought into the idea and working on it with you, the larger your initial core audience is, and the more amplification you get following that. Next, we are looking at your story. So there's 2 key ways to tell your story in a crowdfunding project. The first is a written description, and the second is a video. The video is more exciting, so I'll get the description out of the way quickly. First, you need to look at, well, there's 3 key bits of information that a backer will want to know about you and your project before they feel comfortable enough to back. Those 3 bits of information are what you want to achieve, who you are and what you do, and how you're going to use the funds that you raise. So they're all very important for different reasons. A lot of it's to do with building up credibility. For instance, they want to know that you are someone who can pull off what you say you're going to, so it's really important to say who you are, a bit of history about what it is that you're trying to set up. How you use the funds that you raise is super important. If I back a project and I give somebody £100, I want to know that that £100 is adding value to the core idea of what's going on rather than being wasted. So it's very important that you're transparent about where the money's going and how it's being used. If I feel like my £100 is going to be wasted, I probably won't back your project. And what you want to achieve is an obvious one. If I don't know what it is that you're doing, it's very unlikely that I'm just going to give you money because it could go anywhere. Some key pointers about how you set the description up. It's very important to cover those 3 areas. But in your description, you need to make the information manageable. So I'd always recommend that you break it up into chunks of text, use lots of subtitles, use lots of graphics to break it up. Chances are when somebody is reading the written description, they will scan through it until they pick out the key bits of information that they want. They'll probably be happy with what you want to achieve and how you're going to raise the funds, but maybe they want a little bit more information about who you are and what you've done before. So allowing them to find that information quickly and move straight to the pledge button is very important. If it's a block of text, people have to read all of it before they find the snippet of information that they actually want. You'll find people won't do that. They'll get bored, they'll get distracted, probably go on Facebook, and they're off the page and haven't pledged, which is what we want to try and avoid. The final thing about the written description is every crowdfunding project works off the same template. You have the same space to write your written description. It's really important to try and make that written description your own and take it away from the generic template by using lots of cool imagery, put GIFs in there, create a really nice flow and a story in the description. Okay, so that's the description. The video is exciting. It's often quite daunting. It makes a very big difference to a crowdfunding project. So if you can create a video, then I highly recommend that you should. I think the last data pool that we did at Crowdfunder showed that projects with a video were 50% more likely to be successful than projects without a video. And the simple reason for that is people are lazy and people don't like reading, and if they don't have to read, then they won't. And if they can get all of the information within a 2-minute video and then click pledge, that is the ideal path that we want somebody to run through on your crowdfunding project. So highlights for a video: short is best. 2 minutes is ample time. That's about all you've got to play with to keep someone's attention. Number 2, make sure you are in front of the camera. So your videos are an important way for you to build up more of an emotional connection with your backer, and they want to see who it is who's running the project. It's all part of that idea validation where they know that there's real people behind this and you're not some fraud who's going to run away with the money. So get yourself in front of the camera. Number 3, try not to wing it. There's lots of people out there within the industry who are pro-amateur videos. I guess the idea is that if you look like you're an amateur organisation, then you might get sort of the sympathy pledge. I'm not one of those people. The video is your chance to make a first impression, and we all know how important first impressions are. So any capacity you have to make a higher production value or a better quality video, then you should. Be prepared, write a script, make sure that the video is giving the impression that you are thorough and you know what you're doing and you're here for a reason, and that's being conveyed in the video. And people will take that first impression and apply it to the whole rest of your social enterprise. I've got a video to show everyone. I hope that you're all going to be able to see it. So this is a social enterprise that crowdfunded down in Cornwall, which is actually where we're based. I'm just going to play it and see what everyone thinks. If you have any comments, then stick them in the question box, and hopefully this will work.
Sustainability. It's a word you've heard countless times. It's a word shrouded in misinterpretation. A word weighed down by doomsday predictions and consequences, some of which threaten to become reality. What does it actually mean? The truth is, it means different things to different people. I'm going to tell you what it means to us. We think sustainability is simple. It's about all of us. It's about enhancing habitats for native species and working with nature, not against it. It's about using locally sourced materials and locally produced food that creates food footsteps and not food miles. It's about organic seasonal produce, not chemicals. It's about reducing waste, recycling, upcycling, and salvaging. It's about communities working together to improve their surroundings for the betterment of our health and well-being. It's about being conscious that what you're doing is going to have a lasting effect for the right reasons, and not the wrong. It's about giving, not taking, and ending social injustice to create a fair world for all. We want to create a place that reflects that. A place for education, where people can come and learn new skills, watch wildlife flourish, grow, play, relax, and feel included. A place for apprenticeships, daycare, and community events. A rural escape in an urban setting. We are making community orchard. Come and build a sustainable community with us. We've got got a growing team of passionate, dedicated individuals, but we need your help to make this reality. So please visit our website and sign up and donate to our crowdfund, and let's bring something special to Newquay and Cornwall.
Okay, so there's an example of a video that I would say is very good. It's definitely a good quality video. Luke gets in front of the camera at the end as a powerful call to action. I feel like he's got me interested in the project in the first half of the video, and the second half is much more about who they are and what they want to do, and he gets more into the specifics. There's 100 more video examples of which I can send around at the end, or if you're interested, then my contact details are at the end of the presentation. Tell me a little bit about what project you're doing, and I can send you further examples of what I think good videos are and look like. So now we've got the team and we've got the story. We need to figure out who it is who's actually going to fund the project, and this is by far the single most important activity to do in your planning of a crowdfunding project. We call it a network map. This is a very, very basic version of a network map on the slide. What we do is use groups of audiences and try and put them together to figure out who it is who is going to be interested in crowdfunding or funding your crowdfunding project. So there's only 3 here. There's quite potentially lots more that you could add into that. For instance, social media groups, Facebook and Twitter. Friends and family will most likely be one of the audience segments that you have to reach out to. Different associations, key influencers, followers of industry. And what you're trying to do is build a whole picture of all of the different audience groups who might be interested in crowdfunding your project, and get a feel for the numbers that are involved in those different audiences. Try and figure out who they are, how you reach out to them, and what sort of things are going to incentivize them to pledge. Identifying your crowd is really important, and what it does is forms the basis of the whole pre-funding side of the campaign. It also will help you decide on what rewards you should be offering to your backers. For instance, if I go back, existing customers might want something different to a corporate partnership, who might want something different to your best friends or family, who might want something different to someone in your local area, who might want something different to someone who's based internationally. It's really important to figure out who those people are, what they're incentivized by, and you can build a package of rewards which will be attractive to every single type of person you're hoping to drive onto your project page. Rewards are often looked at as one of the hardest things to do when it comes to reward-based crowdfunding, but actually there's normally loads and loads of rewards that you can offer. So there's a few examples there on the slide. I think the 3 key things with rewards that I would suggest thinking about is, number 1, in the low range, the rewards have to be good value for money. So you can't stick a t-shirt on as a reward for £100, no matter how philanthropic your idea might be and how much is benefiting the community. There's something in the human brain which looks at that as a reward and goes, t-shirt, £100, no, that seems a little bit ridiculous. So make sure that in the lower end, for lower end rewards, they're priced accordingly and they represent good value for money. You've got to reward the risk that they're taking in pledging on your project. Second is, in the high end, they've got to be very exciting. They've got to be exceptional, perhaps one-of-a-kind rewards. Certainly something that you wouldn't normally be able to get off the shelf. The idea with the higher tier rewards are you want someone to be able to go to their friend and say, look at what I've got, or look at what I'm doing, safe in the knowledge that there's a good chance their friend will never be able to do that. That's the same thing. Number 3, is make sure that you have a really good range of rewards. So that is partly looking at financial levels of the rewards you're offering. Most people will start at £5 as their first reward, and we always recommend that you go from £5 up to 10% of your target figure as the highest reward. To put that into an example, if your target is 10 grand, that's what you're trying to raise, your highest reward should be around £1,000. And then you want to go at incremental steps from £5 up to £1,000. So that could be 5, 10, 25, 50, 150, 500, 1,000, depending on what it is that you have to offer. When I talk about great range, I don't just mean financial though, I also mean demographically. It's really important to have something that people local to your project can pledge on, as well as on a national level and on an international level. So that's having a split between events that people can turn up to, which will most likely only incentivize people within a certain radius of your project. On a national level, you might have things that you want to post out. Make sure that someone at the tip of Scotland or Land's End down in Cornwall can still pledge and be involved in your project without having to drive for miles to an event. And on an international level, it's a really nice idea to have something digital, if possible, that you're not going to spend lots and lots of money on sending out for shipping. So that's an overview on rewards. Next we'll look at some of the funding side. So there's two key ways of raising money on Crowdfunder. The first is all or nothing, the second is keep what you raise. All or nothing is where you set a financial target and you have to hit that target within a certain amount of time. Otherwise all of the money goes back to the backers. Keep what you raise is exactly that. You still have a set amount of time, but whatever you raise goes into your pocket. All or nothing, on average, raises about 5 times more than keep what you raise. It's your opportunity to back yourself, and it is absolutely the only funding method that I would ever advise anyone except for a charity to use. And that's sort of the two different models on Crowdfunder. The bit on the right hand side there, setting your target. This is really important, and we'll go back to the identifying your crowd and the segments here. So the average pledge on Crowdfunder is £50. If you take your target figure and divide it by £50, then you get the average number of backers that you need to reach that target. So if we're using £10,000 as an example, divided by 50, that's 200 backers on average you need to try and get pledging on your project to raise £10,000. Once you've drawn this network map, if you put some numbers into that, into those different segments of the Venn diagram, you can quickly figure out if 200 backers is something that's achievable or not. If it's not achievable, then don't go live yet. You need to add more people to your audience segmentation. Find more groups of people, find other parties that would be interested in crowdfunding, and make sure the numbers all add up before you go live. The real question is, can you get enough people to your project to raise the amount that you're hoping to raise based on an average pledge of £50. Next we've got duration, so to run through this really quickly. Longer is not better in rewards-based crowdfunding. The average successful duration is about 28 days for a project. That gives you just long enough to capture all the pledges that you can, but not long enough for you to plateau. So what this graph is showing you is along the duration of your project, how many pledges you're likely to receive on a daily basis. You can see on the left-hand side at the start, lots of pledges. As soon as you launch, it's really exciting. You've done lots of pre-marketing to get everybody excited about what it is that you're trying to do. Everyone jumps in and they get you off to a good start. The other end of the scale, on day 28, let's say, everyone who you've spoken to across the last 28 days who said, yeah, I'll pledge, realizes that you've only got 2 days left on your project. So they all get in and they pledge because they promised to. there's a sense of time urgency towards the end of a project. So you normally capture quite a lot of pledges towards the end. In the middle, this happens to every single project, there is a plateau where you're neither new and exciting or close enough to the end to warrant someone to rush to their computer and pledge as they promised to. If your project is 8 weeks long, which of course you're more than welcome to run an 8-week long project, then you could have a week of intensive pledging at the start and a week of intensive pledging at the end. And that middle section, where the plateau is stretched out to 6 weeks long. And if you do that, it gets very, very difficult to pull yourself back out towards the end. And also you run into the danger of boring people with sending messages for 8 whole weeks saying, will you pledge on my project's live, have you seen this update on my project? So the actual live crowdfunding part of your project should be short and sweet, it should be run quickly, it should be very exciting, you should build momentum into it. If, for instance, you have 8 weeks to get a project together and go live, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing 6 weeks of setup, doing lots of pre-marketing, warming people up, and only going live for 14 days at the end, making it short and driving lots of people in and reducing that plateau in the middle. So, getting funded. This is where we start getting quite exciting. This is really all about marketing. We've got a team together. We know how to put across a story using a description and a video. We've got a target figure we're confident we can hit and is achievable. We've figured out who our audience are, and based on that we've got rewards for all of the audiences. Now we just need to drive people to the project and actually get funded. The secret to marketing a crowdfunding project is momentum. So if you cast your mind back half an hour when I was talking about building a team and how if everyone in the team brings 10 pledges to the project in day one, and then you have 50 different core networks to reach out to based on 5 members of your team. That's a very good example of how you start a crowdfunding project. And you start it within the core networks of people who are most interested and most invested. So here that's represented in the diagram by the people you know. Start with your core network and then ask them to share it and go wider and wider and wider until by the end of your project you're reaching out to people who you had no idea who they were when you first started the project. They had no idea who you were. But they managed to come across your project through a friend of a friend of a friend who posted it on Twitter, who sent it to their colleague, who emailed it out to their organisation because they thought it was something that might be of interest. The reason why building momentum into crowdfunding is so important is that that person who you've reached at the end of the project who is 8, 9, 10 links away from your organisation would very likely not pledge on your project if they saw it on day one and it wasn't very funded. You had sort of a few percent, maybe 20 backers on it. They might come across your project and look at it and say, well, no one else has really backed this yet. I don't know anything about these guys. I'm not confident enough to back on it. If, however, you start with your core network and then they go wider and they go wider and they go wider, by the time it reaches that person who's 8, 9, 10 links away towards the end of the project, you might be fully funded by that point, or very close to it. You've probably got a few hundred backers. That's enough social evidence for that person who doesn't know who you are to go ahead and back your project and become a supporter and get into that group of advocates that you're really after. So there's a few key ways of running the marketing and building momentum. Here they're split up into 3 different areas. On the left you've got pre-live activities. So that's all about lining people up, lining up the core networks, the people who are most interested and most engaged with you and your social enterprise and what you're trying to do, warming them up to the idea of you crowdfunding, getting their feedback. What do you think of this reward? Do you like the page? How's the video looking? That sort of thing. And getting them to agree to pledge on your project within the first few days of it going live to get you off to that all-important start. Then you have the launch event, or the period of launch. You don't have to have an event, although it's usually quite a good way of getting the message out and making sure people pledge on the project straight away. And then on the right-hand side, when you're live, there's a lot of different ways that you can get the message out. I won't go into too much detail onto this because I think it's all fairly self-explanatory by the diagrams there. When you are live, crowdfunding's one of the only funding methods where you can be quite reactive to what's happening. So on Crowdfunder there's a stats page, there's a dashboard that every person who runs a project has access to, and that will tell you how well you're doing based on lots of really smart algorithms that the tech team have developed. It gives you a breakdown of what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. So what you can't see in that diagram is a breakdown of what's happening with your rewards. If, for instance, you have a reward that is doing really, really well, and you have a reward that has no backers on it, then you need to keep your eye on the stats to make sure you take out that reward that has no backers on it and replace it with something similar to the thing which is doing really well. And you can afford to be reactive as long as you're looking at the data and looking at the information within the dashboard and making sure you make informed decisions around that data. So that's it. That's the 6 steps to crowdfunding success. Build a team, build a core network, make sure you have the right skills there. Get your story across in the right way, the key bits of information, who you are, what you're trying to achieve, and how you're going to spend the money. Make sure you've identified a crowd big enough to reach a target figure that you are trying to achieve, and that you're hitting all the different areas that you want to get awareness for your social enterprise. Create rewards that are good value, exciting, and across a range of different price levels and demographics. Definitely go for all or nothing fundraising and create a target around a figure that is achievable but still allows you to do whatever it is that you want to achieve, and then build momentum into any marketing plans that you have when you shout about it. Next steps: if you want to run a crowdfunding project, get your team together, create the plan, go on Crowdfunder and add the project based on all the things that we've spoken about, and get the idea funded. So that concludes the how to crowdfund a social enterprise presentation. Julie, I don't know if you want to take over now and we'll do some Q&As.
Yeah, thank you very much, Si. Thanks so much for today's webinar. I think the slides and the graphs are really excellent, and obviously we'll forward those to all our attendees and the people who can't make it today, and obviously they've got all that information to hand. So some great tips for identifying your audience, the segmentation tips and the calculation formula. So really great information for anybody wishing to start a project. So if anybody else has any more questions, if they'd like to type them in for us, and we already have quite a few questions for you, Si, so if we can go through them. Mark Dodds, he sent us quite a few in. Now, he's about to begin a crowdfund community share issue to raise money to buy a village pub called the Black Bull in Northumberland Borders.
Great.
I'd like to ask about combining rewards and community shares in one crowdfunder presentation.
Okay. Yeah, so you absolutely can do that. Crowdfunder is the only platform in the UK that you can do that, and it's a really good idea. So my key tips for that would be to make sure that the rewards-based side are inclusive of everyone in the local community. They're the guys who are most likely to be pledging on a community shares project. And it's a really good idea to have some very, very low-level rewards, low-level price range rewards in there, to make sure that you can include as many people as possible and get everyone engaged, regardless of if they can afford or if they want to purchase a community share in the pub. We actually have a pub live at the moment. It's called the Duke of Marlborough up in Sheffield. So I would suggest heading over to the community shares platform on Crowdfunder and checking that out, seeing how well they're doing. I think they've raised about 120 grand so far, and they've got 2 weeks left, and that's a mix of rewards-based crowdfunding and offering community shares.
Right, thank you for that. Another question from Gail. What's the best time to start a crowdfunder campaign when you're building a project deadline for March, April 2016? Now, the reasons she wants to use crowdfund is to raise awareness of an arts project, and she'd like to print a catalogue with art events during the 4-week events exhibition and workshops in March, April next year. So she's wondering when would the best time to build the project deadline?
I would avoid crowdfunding in January and probably launch the project in February. That's 4 weeks long, providing that you can get everything printed for your deadline March, April time. The reason I do that is because you build lots of excitement. There's lots of buzz and lots of marketing that goes into a crowdfunding project, and the people who back are going to be very engaged, and most likely the people who will turn up to the event itself. And you want to use the momentum that you create through the crowdfunding project to spill into the event and join it up all as one. But typically the first couple of weeks of January are fairly difficult. It's a fairly difficult time to crowdfund, just because people tend to go a bit nuts at Christmas and spend lots of money. I definitely do that, and they don't have maybe they don't have as much disposable income to put into crowdfunding projects or things outside of the necessities that they need to purchase. So my advice would be start of February, providing you have enough time to print and get the awareness out for the arts event that you're doing.
Right, and obviously you can build your team in that time as well. You can do all that behind the scenes momentum. So yeah, that's great. And obviously January is such a dead month after Christmas with nobody having any money. So that's great to take something that's seasonal like that into the equation. Next question. Can you also do a mixed rewards and equity campaign? That's Gary asking that.
You can, although the core will be equity, and people usually tend to offer a reward on top of the equity. So if I was to purchase £1,000 in an organisation, I might get 5 free whatever the product is or whatever the service is that the company that's crowdfunding plans to sell or is currently selling. There's no way currently that you could do up to £500, for instance, are rewards, and above £500 is equity, although that is something that probably will come about in the future.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question from Mark, very important question around equity, the community shares. Do you have a clear idea, Si, of what level of investment, either perhaps a 200 or 1,000, is a good base to start at? Some of the people involved think £1,000 should be the minimum investment, but he thinks it's far too high and risks alienating lots of people who can't afford that kind of pledge.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's actually quite a difficult one for me to answer, because really it depends on the community around the community share that you're trying to run, and what levels of disposable income they might have and they might think is justifiable to spend on the community purchase. So the easiest way of finding out is to go out and ask people what's the minimum or what's the maximum that you would afford to spend on a community share for this project, and get some real life feedback from the people most likely to pledge on your project. Otherwise, we are running a community shares webinar in 10 days time with a community shares expert who works on the Crowdfunder platform, and he will have a much better he's much more knowledgeable than I am on community shares, and have a much better picture of what is an affordable amount for the average community share project. So I'd recommend coming and having a listen to him. He's called Dave Boyle. He's one of the leading experts in the UK. for the community shares side of things.
That's great. And if you follow UnLtd social media, both our Twitter, Facebook, UnLtd, LinkedIn, we will be promoting that for Crowdfunder UK. So that will be after today's video. Mark's just come back. It was Mark that asked the questions, and he says he knows Dave Boyle. So
great.
Yeah, so I'm sure he'll be tuning in for that. So thanks for answering that, Si. Just a thank you from Gail. She said, thanks for the great information to start the campaign for her arts booklet in February. So thank you for that. Obviously, that makes great sense, but you don't always think of things like that. So, and Mark said, thank you very much for answering his questions. A question from Ian. Ian was asking about the video. Should you hire a professional, or should you get students, or is it okay to create your own video? How professional does it have to be?
That's a good question. It really depends on the project and what you're trying to achieve. So if your target figure is £500, that's all you need to raise, then definitely don't hire a professional filmographer, because he'll probably charge you more than the 500 quid that you're trying to raise. If you want something that's really sleek, then I'd recommend finding someone locally who has the capacity to do something. We quite often use a guy down in Cornwall who is self-employed, but he makes very adequate videos and very adequate films. And usually that's the best way to go about it. So check out things like Odesk for people who might be able to make videos in your local area, rather than going through agencies. They tend to be quite expensive. Using students is really good. You can't always guarantee the quality,
no,
but it is much cheaper. And of course you can make a film on your iPhone or Android smartphone. You've just got to be wary of that first impression and what sort of idea you're giving someone about you and about your project through the quality of video.
Yeah, as you said, it's all about building that credibility and trust and making your video a powerful call to action. So as you say, there's lots on your website, so people can get a good indication of the quality and input for that. So you know, people can check that out. So Ian said, thanks, that's a great response. So thank you for that. Another question from Gary said, thanks for answering his question. Do you have any insights for campaigns that have a local and a national emphasis? For example, projects that are delivered in several localities across the country?
Yes, I do, yeah. So we actually launched one of these on Thursday, on the 1st, where we took a group of fundraisers. It's for a charity called Copperfield, and they have a team of Boobettes. Copperfield's a charity that supports getting awareness out there for breast cancer, especially for younger women who get breast cancer. And the whole ethos of Copperfield is to make sure that you're checking at the right times and the right places. And the Boobettes go out to schools and universities and colleges and businesses all across the country and deliver workshops and create that awareness. It's a really important thing that they're doing. They all do exactly the same thing, but regionalised. So we supported them in creating a campaign that was running exactly the same project. They all have a templated project that we worked on and optimised together. And they've changed the rewards so that they are suitable for their local regions. And they're going out in their regions and raising money towards that one singular Copperfield pot to enable them to continue doing all the good stuff that they're doing. So it's a relatively small campaign. Copperfield just wanted to raise £10,000 to support the efforts of the Boobettes over the next 6 to 12 months. They launched 5 days ago. They're already 60% of the way towards the 10 grand, so we're looking quite hopeful for maybe a 200% overfund on that campaign. The key thing for me with a campaign that has similar projects replicated across the UK is to make sure the rewards are individual to each project, so that they reflect the people in the local community and what they're most likely to pledge on. but also try and keep it as standardised as possible. Make sure you create the perfect project page for all of them to use, which has all of the key information, and try and find tools and ways to support each individual fundraiser to reach out to their own local communities and build their own local network maps, all of which are resources that sit on Crowdfunder and that you can download, workbooks and fundraising packs, etc. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as you said, your network map, that's a great way to plan who your audience is and to make sure that you keep it local. If I can just give an example of my hometown football club, Grimsby Town, Operation Promotion, they had a range of rewards from £5 up, and they really did keep it local with the famous Harry Haddock. So anybody who's a football supporter will know about the Harry Haddock inflatable. So, and that was really relevant. So as you say, it's just keeping it local and knowing your audience. So that's, you know, excellent information.
Yeah, it's a good project, like Grimsby Town project. That's fun.
And we've actually got an overseas listener, Rachel. She's tuned in a little late, and she missed the beginning. She's asking, is this platform only available in the UK? She's tuning in from Canada, and if it's not available, do you have any other platform recommendations? And she said it's been a very informative presentation.
Yeah, so you can run a project on Crowdfunder from anywhere in the world. You can also back a project on Crowdfunder from anywhere in the world. But if I'm being totally honest, 95% of the traffic that's on Crowdfunder is based in the UK. We haven't expanded internationally, although we probably will look to do that in the future. I'm sure Canada will be top of the list, given that it's in North America, which is one of the largest markets, or North America is one of the largest markets for crowdfunding. So yeah, yes, you can run a project on Crowdfunder, but you'd have to drive a lot of the local traffic to the project yourself, and I wouldn't rely on us having necessarily Canadian traffic who will roam the site and automatically back your project. In terms of projects in platforms in Canada, I would give it a Google. There's probably hundreds of them, and depending on what sort of industry you're in and the niche that you want to go down, there might be better ones than others.
Right, well, I think that's all the time we've got for questions. We still do have a couple of more questions. Your information will be on the slide, Si. Is it okay for people to contact you if they have any further questions?
Sure, yeah.
Brilliant.
That's absolutely fine.
That's great. So hopefully some of your questions have been answered today. I'd just like to thank you again, Si, for your time and expertise today, and also for our last webinar that we had to cancel halfway through. So really do appreciate your time and support for Unlimited and our award winners today. So thank you very much.
It's my pleasure.
I really learned a lot today, and as I say, I think the slides is a great handout for anybody wishing to start a project. So I'd just like to thank you all for joining us today. So the presentation will be available on Unlimited's YouTube channel over the next couple of days, and I'll forward you all the link and today's presentation so you can listen at your leisure and you have the slides. So I'd just like to say our next webinar is on the 13th of October, a comprehensive guide to social value with guest presenter Richard Dickens from Make It Happen. So you can book our webinars via our website. So I'd just like to wish you all a good afternoon. Thanks again and goodbye.